Dear honorable guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Welcome to the Venerable Yuen Memorial Trust Professorship in Buddhist Studies inaugural lecture. Professor Klaus-Dieter, being the first Venerable Yuen Memorial Trust Professor, will give the inaugural lecture today with the theme, The Concept of Tathāgatagarbha, Are We All Buddhas by Nature? Before the lecture begins, I would like to invite Professor David Pomfret, Dean of the Faculty of Arts of HKU, to give the welcoming speech. Professor Pomfret, please.
Thank you very much indeed, Carol. Venerable Sik Hin Hung, Professor Klaus Matters, distinguished guests and colleagues. It's my pleasure to say a few words by way of welcome to this splendid occasion. On a very wet and stormy day, we have the Venerable Yuen Memorial Trust Professorship in Buddhist Studies inaugural lecture. As we gather together to enjoy this event, it's our honor to have with us the representative of the Trust, its chairman, Venerable Sik Hin Hung. Now, as many of you all know, the Trust was established in 2010 in memory of the Venerable Yuen to advance, promote, and disseminate Buddhist philosophy and practice. And with generous donations exceeding $14 million, the Trust has facilitated important initiatives and projects that have enriched the academic landscape at the University of Hong Kong. On behalf of the Faculty of Arts, I should like to thank the Trust and its representative for their dedication and support for our Center for Buddhist Studies. And in particular today, I should like to extend our gratitude for endowing the professorship that we're honoring with the inaugural lecture. Now, only a few months ago, we had the opportunity to join together at the dedication ceremony, celebrating the appointment of the very first recipient of the Venerable Yuen Memorial Trust Professorship in Buddhist Studies, our esteemed colleague, Professor Klaus Matters. Today, we're very fortunate to have Professor Matters with us to share his profound academic insights and knowledge at this very special event. Professor Matters, of course, needs no introduction. He's a world-leading scholar of Indian and Tibetan Buddhism. There isn't sufficient time to do justice to all of his achievements, but suffice to say, since taking his PhD from Marburg University in 1994, he's dedicated his life to the study of Buddhist philosophy in various roles, as director of the Nepal Research Center, as leader of the Nepal German Manuscript Preservation Project in Kathmandu, and before joining the University of Hong Kong in August 2023, he was at the University of Vienna, and there he contributed extensively to the field of Indology as the head of the Department of South Asian, Tibetan, and Buddhist Studies. He's played a leading role in building global networks, shaping scholarly discourse, and advancing knowledge on Indian Buddhist philosophy. Professor Matters has also contributed landmark books in the field of Indo-Tibetan Buddhism. His work illuminates the complex interplay of exclusivism and eclecticism in Mahayana Buddhism. And in particular, it has enriched our understanding of the Mahayana concept of Buddha nature and has opened up new lines of research into the study of Mahāmudrā and Yogācāra. We are fortunate to be able to bring Professor Matters to the University of Hong Kong to further enhance the visibility and the impact of Buddhist studies at our center and beyond. Ladies and gentlemen, in a moment, I'd like to invite you to sit back and enjoy our Venerable Yuen Memorial Trust Professorship in Buddhist Studies inaugural lecture. Please prepare to be inspired by Professor Matters as he presents on the concept of Tathāgatagarbha, Are We All Buddhas by Nature? Please join me in welcoming Professor Matters.
Thank you, Professor Pomfret. Please remain on stage. Now I would like to invite a few more guests for photo taking to capture this wonderful moment. May I now invite Venerable Hin Hong, Chairman of the Venerable Yuen Memorial Trust, Professor K.D. Mates, our Venerable Yuen Memorial Trust Professor, but last but not least, Professor Georges Hakis, Director of the HKU Center of Buddhist Studies. So let's take a group photo together. Thank you so much. Thank you very much. So may our guests please be seated now, and without further ado, please join me to give another big round of applause to Professor Mates to begin the lecture.
Hello, everybody. I'm glad you made it here. Like, I was a bit worried when I looked out of the window this morning, and I thought, my goodness, what's going to happen, in the afternoon. But we all made it, and I'm glad you all come. Thank you so much. Yeah. Now, thank you very much also for the kind introduction, and I hope, David, that I can live up to the words you have said about me. And first of all, I feel very much honored also to have been appointed the Venerable Yuen Memorial Trust Professor here, and it's a great pleasure for me to be here in Hong Kong and teach at the Center of Buddhist Studies. It's just such a very great center, and I think it has the best program for Buddhist studies all over the world. Yeah. The courses are very complex and rich, and there's no other university and no other center, with such a course variety to offer. So it's really an honor for me to be here and to teach and to do research. So thank you for having invited me here. Now, I thought, I choose an easy topic for an inaugural lecture, and that's Buddha nature, and it's basically very easy. So it means, don't worry, you are already a Buddha. So you already have a Buddha inside. So just relax, and discover your true nature. So that it's a very easy teaching in a way. And when I had written my habilitation thesis, which was nearly 700 pages, it was on Buddha nature. And people were saying, how can you write 700 pages on such an easy topic? You just need to say one sentence, you're a Buddha inside. But scholars tend to make things difficult, there are different concepts. You look up words in dictionaries, and then there's a history of ideas, you look at different developments and reception history, and then things can get very complex very soon. And I'm trying to guide you through this historical development in an easy, understandable way. And I show you how scholars made things very difficult, but I try to communicate that in an easy way, easy to understand way. Now, I was thinking, shall I use Buddha nature? But it's a bit complicated, and we will see that in a minute. Yeah. So I have used the Sanskrit technical term Tathāgatagarbha because it can have so many different meanings, and based on the original Sanskrit, it can mean, for example, a stūpa or Buddha relics and things like that. So I have chosen the correct technical term for my title. Yeah. But I'm going to explain you immediately what this terrible Sanskrit word means. Well, you can analyze it as Tathāgata and Garbha. Now, Tathāgata, most of you probably know that it means Buddha. And why does it mean Buddha? Well, it means thus gone, Tathāgata. Yeah? But you can analyze the compound also in a way Tathāgata, and then it means thus come back. And this gives a very nice meaning, of Tathāgata, as it means that the Buddha has thus gone into liberation, into nirvana, but not in the peaceful nirvana of leaving the world. He remains in the world, or rather he has come back to the world, agata, to unfold his Buddha activity here in this world. Yeah, so Tathāgata is not simply a synonym of Buddha, but it has this profound meaning. Yeah. Now, Garbha the meaning garbha ranges from essential ingredient, then it would be Sanskrit dhātu, to true nature. And the attested meanings of Tathāgatagarbha then are like physical Buddha relics. And that was probably like the original meaning of Tathāgatagarbha. So when the Buddha had passed away and when he had been cremated, there were some relics. And the different Buddhist communities, they tried to get hold of these relics and put them in stūpas. A stūpa, you can see, this is a stūpa, right? It's a monument, it's a tomb, and it was used to bury royals, and then it was also used to house the Buddha relics. And the community, the Buddhist community, who had lost the living Buddha, then venerated a stūpa. They thought, like his enlightened mind is still present with us through his relics in a stūpa like that. Yeah. So, like Tathagatagarbha, can first of all mean physical Buddha relics, and then it can mean a stūpa, a tomb or a monument for a Buddha. But then this can be also used in a metaphorical sense that sentient beings have in their bodies like a stūpa or a monument for a Buddha. Then they don't have, of course, like a stone structure in their body, but this has to be understood as they contain in themselves the Buddha relics or the Buddha nature in a similar way as the stūpa contains the relics. Yeah, I'm sorry, I pressed the wrong button. Yeah, here. The stūpa contains the relics, in a similar way. So our body contains, the essence of a Buddha. And then, it means also essential ingredient of a Buddha. But garbha, it can mean also embryo, and that's quite interesting. So that's maybe a little bit the bad news. Maybe you, after all, are not a fully grown Buddha, but you only have a Buddha embryo in yourself, which means you still have to do something. You have to give birth, to the embryo. You have to feed it. You have to look after it. It needs to grow. It needs to become a fully grown Buddha. And that's also a meaning quite common in East Asia. Garbha in Tathāgatagarbha can also mean womb for a Buddha embryo, and that refers to the omniscience and enlightenment of the Buddha, which pervades the whole universe. And this all-pervading wisdom of the Buddha is like a womb, in which we sentient beings can grow and become a Buddha. So that's a very common concept in East Asia. And then it can also simply mean sentient beings' true nature of mind. Yeah? And that's a meaning which has become quite popular later on. Now we continue to the next slide. And we are now referring to Tathagatagarbha as Buddha nature. It's quite tiresome to say always Tathāgatagarbha. And you have to be careful that the second I is always very long, and the T's must be really sharp, and then so it's quite difficult, It's easier, to just call it Buddha nature. But I started giving you the original Sanskrit term because you have seen it has all these different meanings here. So we are looking now at the concept of Buddha nature as sentient beings' true nature of mind. And all beings, they possess a Buddha as their true nature. And this true nature is replete with inseparable Buddha qualities. That means that our true nature of mind has all the qualities of a Buddha which are inseparable. Yeah? And whereas, the ordinary types of mind, which are influenced by ignorance, hatred, and attachment, and all the different defilements, all these different properties, they are separable. Yeah? So basically, this whole concept works in this way. You have two layers of mind. One is our ordinary mind, which is ignorance and so forth. And under this layer of normal mind, you have a Buddha nature, which is replete with all Buddha qualities. And the Gyaltsā Nupel, he has given a very nice example for separable and inseparable qualities. The heat of water is something separable. You have a pot of hot water, and you put your hand inside, you really burn yourself. So it has this property of being hot. But hot water you can leave somewhere and let it lose the property of being hot. So in a similar way, you can leave your mind in meditation, and the mind will slowly lose its heat of ignorance and attachment and so forth. Yeah, so these kind of properties, they are separable. So we can get rid of them. But the properties of Buddha nature, they are inseparable, like the heat of fire. Wherever you have fire, you have heat. You cannot have a fire without heat, to use the example of Gyaltsā Nupel. And that means, you will always have these inseparable qualities wherever you go, even if you go to hell or through very difficult times of life, you will always have these Buddha properties. They are inseparable. Yeah. Now, in the basic original teachings of Buddha nature, the Buddha nature represents the embodiment of Buddha qualities, or the Dhammakaya, which is the term for a fully developed Buddha in everybody. So that means that we all have these Buddha qualities, and there is no difference between a Dhammakaya of a Buddha and our Buddha nature, except that the Buddha nature is still covered up by adventitious stains or ignorance and these ordinary mind states. Yeah. And but when we look now at the original sources for this doctrine, the so-called Tathāgatagarbha sutras, and I have to say, there is a group of sutras which are called Tathāgatagarbha sutras, then I use the plural, but in this group of Tathāgatagarbha sutras, there is also one specific text called the Tathagatagarbha Sutra. So you have to watch out whether I'm using the plural or not. Yeah. And so in this group of discourses on Buddha nature, you have occasional parts or textual passages which give the idea that something in the Buddha nature still needs to be developed. There are some aspects in Buddha nature which have to grow. Yeah. So it all depends now. You can imagine already that whether you follow the main thrust of the Tathāgatagarbha sutras and say all sentient beings are a Buddha already inside, or if you don't like this idea, you have a few small textual passages which give the idea that something has to grow. And this is how the whole dispute started. Yeah. Now, recent research has shown that among these Tathāgatagarbha sutras, or discourses on the Buddha nature, it was the great discourse on the great nirvana, which used the word Tathāgatagarbha for the first time. And that's the research of Stephen Hodge and Michael Raddick. And it is thus not anymore the Tathāgatagarbha Sutra, which is considered to be the oldest sutra which use this term, but it is the Great Nirvana Sutra. I give you also the Sanskrit in brackets, but you don't need to remember that. It's only when you want to look something up in literature, academic literature, you need the Sanskrit term sometimes. And in this Great Nirvana Sutra, Tathāgatagarbha was first used as referring to the relics of the Buddha, the physical Buddha relics, the Buddha dhātus. And Kazu Kano, another expert, Japanese expert in the field of Buddha nature studies, points out that the great Nirvana Sutra had been interpreted as something, the term Tathāgatagarbha has been interpreted as something in us that has Tathāgata as its essence. So among the Indologists, are there any Indologists? Probably not. But that would be simply a Bahuvrihi compound analysis of Tathāgatagarbha. Yeah. And Michael Raddick further suggests that the double meaning of the term dhātu as relics, as well as the element or essential ingredient of a Buddha, enabled a shift of focus from the remnant past, physical Buddhahood, dhātu, to a Buddha within. And based on this development, the standard English translation for Tathagatagarbha has become Buddha nature, which would be literally Buddha dhātu, or for Xingyin Chinese, or Sangyegikam in Tibetan. And it's quite interesting, in his commentary on the Heart Sutra, Prajastasena refers to the Buddha within as Sangyegi Novo Ni. We don't have the original Sanskrit, but if you translate the Tibetan back into Sanskrit, you would have Buddha Svabhava, which would be Buddha nature would be a very literal translation of Buddha Svabhava then. Yeah. So that leads to the question of do we only have a Buddha embryo in us, or are we fully grown Buddhas? And the great Nirvana Sutra is not always clear about that. But there is a very interesting observation by Kasukano, who studied the great Nirvana Sutra for a long time. And he said, well, the sutra sometimes refers to the Buddha nature in you as an embryo, because it would be a sin to walk around and say, I'm a Buddha. Yeah? It's simply not good, to do that. And in order to avoid this attitude, the sutra was sometimes referring to the Buddha nature or to the Buddha inside you as a Buddha embryo. But then, later on, it explains why it was using the word Buddha embryo, and then it explained that the meaning of Buddha embryo only is provisional. So it's not the definitive meaning of the sutra. So I don't know whether you're familiar with this distinction of Buddha sermons of definitive and provisional meaning. The thing is, that the Buddha did not always give teachings of definitive meaning. Sometimes he was giving teachings of provisional meaning in order to guide students. Yeah. Now, that's a quite interesting observation, and very important in the discussion whether we are already fully grown Buddhas or not. Yeah. Now, we look at other initial ideas of Buddha nature. You have to imagine that the development of Buddhism, and Mahayana Buddhism in particular, was very complex. There were so many different strands of sutras and teachings and concepts developing parallel to each other. And we don't have to look only at the sutras, at the discourses which use the word Buddha nature, but other sutras which don't use a technical term also describe the concept or are familiar with the concept. And one of them is a discourse on the garland of Buddhas, the Avatamsaka Sutra, which is also quite famous in East Asia. And I quote from this sutra, it says, "There is not a single sentient being in the group of sentient beings into whom the wisdom of the Tathāgata has not completely entered. Nevertheless, because of clinging to notions, the wisdom of the Tathāgata is not known. But free from the clinging to notions, the wisdom of the omniscient, self-arisen wisdom manifests without hindrances." So the idea is that everybody in us has a self-arisen Buddha wisdom. And that becomes clear now, in an example the Avatamsaka Sutra is using, and it illustrates the presence of omniscience and Buddha wisdom with the following example. So imagine there's a very fine silk cloth, very, very fine, and it's as huge as the whole universe. And then you paint a map, scale 1 to 1 on this very fine, silk cloth. And then you wrap up the silk cloth. And because the silk cloth is so fine, you can make it very tiny, small, and you can put this folded up silk cloth in an atom. So imagine that every atom in the universe has inside this map of the universe scale 1 to 1. So that's the simile. And what is illustrated by that? Well, it means, that we all have this wonderful Buddha wisdom, this omniscience in us, but wrapped up. Yeah? And this example in the Avatamsaka Sutra is not using the word Buddha nature, but it gives the idea. It gives the idea that we are a fully grown Buddha in us. And remember, the map, like on the silk cloth, is 1 to 1. It's scale 1 to 1. So it means, you have a fully grown omniscience like in each of you. And that also, like this example shows another important point. It means also that each of you has his or her own omniscience. So it's clearly something against monism. Monism has been often like levied like as a charge, against Buddha nature doctrine. But this sutra clearly shows that it is not a monist doctrine. There is not only one single Buddha wisdom pervading everything, but everybody has his or her own Buddha wisdom. And then, like it goes on, the Buddha sees, like that everybody has this omniscience inside. It's covered up by conceptual thought, ignorance, and so on. And he tries his level best to cut the knots of this conceptualizing ignorance and so on, and to free this omniscience in every sentient being. Yeah. So that's the Avatamsaka Sutra. Yeah. Now again, coming back to the great Nirvana Sutra, and you remember you have the concept of Buddha nature being a container, a tomb, or a stūpa for a Tathāgata. That means that the Buddha relics have been put in a stūpa, and they were worshipped in a stūpa, and as such, this Buddha nature is then taught to be permanent, blissful. It embodies a self, an Atman, and is pure. And these four properties, they are referred to as the perfections of the embodiment of Buddha qualities, or the perfections of the Dharmakaya, to use the Sanskrit word. So you have to imagine the following situation. You have like a community, a religious community, and there was a guru, there was a teacher, there was a Buddha, and he was there every day. You could meet him, you could ask questions, get advice, and when there was a problem with the community, you could see him, and he could settle a few disputes. So it was like a nice community with a leader, a teacher, and all of a sudden he passes away. So that's a big loss for the community, you can imagine. Yeah, I mean, you can see it in present religious communities and groups. When the guru all of a sudden passes away, they have to make up for something. They watch videos of the guru, or they somehow try to substitute. And one way was just to build a stūpa and put the relics of the Buddha inside the stūpa, and then they think, but now, this structure, this stūpa with the relics inside, this is now permanent. It will not die like our guru died. So it is permanent, it has a self, it is pure, and so on. And it's easy to understand how you can come up with these attributes. But on the other hand, it's of course difficult to claim that inside you there's a permanent self or a permanent Atman. Yeah. Why is this a problem? Well, I mean, most Buddhist schools and philosophers were refuting the idea that we have an Atman. We don't have a permanent self or independent self in us. That would be considered non-Buddhist. Yeah. So some critiques of Buddha nature thought, they bring up this point. They say, well, this doctrine is not a Buddhist doctrine because it endorses the notion of a permanent Atman. So these attributes, the four perfections of the Dharmakaya, are seen as a problem by mainstream Buddhists. Yeah. Now, there were some explanations which illustrate these four perfections and like how they were understood, for example, in the discourse for the noble Queen Mala. Queen Mala was a devout Buddhist who met the Buddha, and she asked a lot of questions to the Buddha. But as it is very often, especially in South Asian contexts, like questions can become very, very, very long. So the queen was more or less teaching, and the Buddha was just simply answering, well spoken, yes, this is how it is. So it's basically a teaching by Queen Mala, which was approved by the Buddha. And in this sutra, we start with the four misperceptions. So we normally think that our skandhas, our psychophysical aggregates, are permanent, whereas they are impermanent in reality. We consider that our situation in samsara, which is full of suffering, is blissful. So that's a misperception. We misperceive suffering as bliss. And where there is no self, where there is no Atman, we perceive a self. So we cling to a self in us. We believe that we have a permanent self, even though there is no such permanent self. And what is impure, we consider to be pure. So this is a problem. And these four misperceptions, they are responsible for us being reborn again and again in samsara. So the Buddhist teaching basically consists of pointing out that our skandhas are impermanent, that samsara is suffering, that we have no self, and that samsara is impure. But now, what happens according to this sutra, after you have entered this path and you have familiarized yourself with this concept of impermanence and impurity and so on, and you start clinging to these concepts, and all of a sudden, when your true nature is showing up, because you are advancing on the Buddhist path, then you would also call your true nature or your Dharmakaya impermanent and impure and suffering and lacking a self. And then in such a situation, when you have advanced and when you have access to your true nature, to your Buddha nature, the sutra says, illustrious one, sentient beings with the notion of permanence, bliss, self, and purity would be legitimate sons of the illustrious one. Illustrious one is Bhagavan in Sanskrit, so it's a synonym for Buddha. Those sentient beings would not be mistaken and possess the correct view. For which reason? In this very Dharmakaya of the Buddha, illustrious one, are the perfections of permanence, bliss, self, and purity. So that's in the eyes of many Buddhists a problem. And then, the Srimaladevi Sutra goes on. The Dharmakaya is without beginning in time, not fabricated, unborn, without end, permanent, stable, calm, eternal, by nature, purified, freed from the thief of all defilements, and then endowed with inseparable and inconceivable Buddha qualities, which surpass in number the grains of sand of the river Ganga. And then it continues as precisely this Dharmakaya of the Tathāgata, illustrious one, is called Buddha nature when the thief of defilements is not separated. So that means, in this sutra too, we have a full equation of Buddha nature with the complete Buddha. We have a fully grown Buddha inside. Now, I have to tell you a story. There was a famous Nepali Brahmin, Sri Dharana, who converted to Buddhism, and he became a great Buddhist scholar in the Sakya order, in the Tibetan Sakya order. He translated several books from Tibetan into Nepali. He did 3 retreats, and one day he came to know that I was in town, and so he sent one of his disciples to see me, and he, the disciple of Sri Dharana, told me, well, my master says, if the true intent of the Buddha is the Buddha nature, which is permanent and has a self, and then, I should not have converted to Buddhism. I could have stayed a Brahmin. So why did I convert? So that was that is not a Buddhist teaching. And of course, I studied different Tibetan interpretations of the four qualities of the Dharmakaya, and I could give very nice answers, and I will give you some answers later on. Just be a little bit patient. But it shows a little bit the problem, of this strand of Buddhist teachings as represented in the Great Nirvana Sutra and in the discourse for the Noble Queen Mala. Yeah. And again, like the Srimala Sutra says, well, Buddha nature is empty of all defilements, but not empty of all Buddha qualities. And the qualities of a Buddha are inseparably connected and surpass in number the grains of the sand of the river Ganga. Yeah. And there is one great Indian treatise, scholarly treatise on the Buddha nature, the Ratnagotravibhāga, the analysis of the jewel family, and it picks up this idea of inseparable qualities, and it says, thus one truly sees that something is empty of that which does not exist in it, and one truly realizes that that which remains there is present and hence exists there. Having thus abandoned the extremes of wrong assertion and denial, Maitreya correctly elucidates the defining characteristics of emptiness. So Maitreya is the author of this standard treatise on Buddha nature, the future Buddha in Tushita, and Asanga is said to have received teachings of the future Buddha from Maitreya in the Tushita heaven. So the standard Indian treatise on Buddha nature picks up this idea from the Srimala Sutra. Yeah. And here we have a nice summary of this doctrine in 2 verses of the analysis of the jewel family. And it goes as follows. There's nothing to be removed from it and nothing to be added. The real should be seen as real, and seeing the real, one becomes liberated. The Buddha element is empty of adventitious stains, which have the defining characteristic of being separable. But it is not empty of unsurpassable qualities, which have the defining characteristic of not being separable. Yeah, so that's the main doctrine, which has been also identified in the standard Indian treatise on Buddha nature. Here you see a statue of the future Buddha Maitreya in Liki Gompa in Ladakh. And you can see it's something like 15 meters high. There are 3 stories. It's a huge Buddha statue, and you can always recognize the future Buddha Maitreya by his European sitting posture. It's the only Buddha which sits not cross-legged. Yeah. Now, I like to give you a few more textual passages which are important for the doctrine of Buddha nature. And it is the Tathāgatagarbha Sutra, and that's not now the group of sutras or discourses on Buddha nature, but it's the Tathāgatagarbha Sutra. And long time Western scholarship has thought that this discourse used the word Tathāgatagarbha for the first time. But now we have understood that it was the great Nirvana Sutra which came up with the concept for the first time, or rather the technical term for the first time. Still, the Tathāgatagarbha Sutra is quite early, and it has 9 examples to illustrate the idea that all sentient beings have a Buddha inside. The setting is such that the Buddha, by some miracle, and manifested a lot of lotuses in the sky. And the Bodhisattvas, the disciples of the Buddha, they came and looked, and they were wondering, why does the Buddha manifest so many lotuses in the sky? What do you want to show us with that? And then they looked on, and first the lotuses, they were were smelling very nicely. They had a nice looking shape. but they started to stink and to fall apart. And when the leaves were falling off, there were Buddhas inside the lotuses. And the Buddha said, well, like it is like that with your ordinary life. Yeah, first you're very young, you have a nice body, like smelling very well, a very attractive body, but eventually you get old, and you start not to have such a nice smell anymore, you get sick and you die. But inside you, there's a Buddha, and this remains, and this doesn't change. And then the sutra goes on to give 8 more examples. Altogether, there are 9 examples then to illustrate the presence of a Buddha inside all sentient beings. So one example would be the honey shielded by bees. So then you have kernels enclosed by husks. Basically, you have always something very nice and desirable, like as essence, which is always surrounded by something you have to overcome. So you want to get the honey, well, you have to get rid of the bees. You want to eat the nut, well, you have to get rid of the husk, and so on. And there is also the example of a gold nugget which has fallen into excrements. You have to find it, you have to clean it. Yeah, and then the, example number 5 is a hidden treasure beneath the house of some poor person. The idea is that a man comes to riches and buries a lot of silver and gold coins under his house, and all of a sudden he dies before he could tell his sons that there's a big treasure buried under the house. And the family doesn't have anything to eat, is starving, but half a meter under them were a lot of gold coins. So in a similar way, like sentient beings are all suffering from all the defilements, but inside them they have this wonderful Buddha nature, and all these amazing qualities, but they don't know about it. And then come a few examples which are interesting. There is the example of a sprout in the seed. That means that in a seed you already have basically the sprout and a full-grown plant. The information for the seed and the sprout to grow, for the seed to grow a sprout, is already contained in the seed, and nothing needs to be added to it. Still, there's a notion of growth. And then you have a Buddha image wrapped up in rotten rags. So you just have to find out that, well, within these rotten rags, there's a precious Buddha statue. And then number 8, that's also an example which gives the idea of some growth. The future universal emperor in the womb of a poor, destitute woman. So a woman who has no money, no food, is pregnant with the future monarch, and is basically already on the safe side of life. So she is already the future queen mother, yeah. And but the embryo, the future monarch, still has to grow up, yeah. He needs to be raised and so on. So you have some idea of natural growth. So if you follow the 2 examples of a sprout in the seed and the future universal emperor, you could argue that we may have a Buddha nature with some qualities, but certain aspects still need to grow. Yeah? And number 9 is again, a golden figure within burned clay molds, and that also gives the idea of a fully grown Buddha inside or covered up by adventitious stains. So within the 9 examples, we have 7 examples which fully support the idea that we have a Buddha inside us, a fully grown Buddha inside us. But there are 2 examples which indicate that you may have to develop a few things. Yeah. Now, that is then the idea that you need to accumulate merit and wisdom, and do more than just remove hindrances. Yeah? But then, you could say, the majority of the examples, they tell you that you have a fully grown Buddha inside. And these two examples of the seed and the future monarch, they basically mean that, well, the mother is already on the safe side of life, and the whole information of the sprout and the tree is already contained in a seed. And we have to understand the sutra in a way that we are fully grown Buddhas. And then we have other passages, like in the Great Nirvana Sutra, which say that this notion of Buddha embryo or Buddha growth, it has only a provisional meaning, and it was only taught, like so that people don't show off and say, I'm already a Buddha. Yeah. Now, let's see like what the Shastra, the typical standard Indian treatise, like on Buddha nature, did with that. So it gave us a commentary on the 9 examples, and it summarized these 9 examples into 3 reasons for the presence of a Buddha nature in all sentient beings. So first of all, the analysis of the Jewel family says, by virtue of the presence of Buddha wisdom in all kinds of sentient beings, yeah, like everybody has a Buddha nature, so that's reason number 1. So that basically means that the Buddha wisdom pervades everything, and including all sentient beings, and that's why you have a Buddha nature. So it's not really your own nature, but it's something which pervades you. And then, you have reason number 2, the fact that the Buddha nature's stainlessness is by nature without duality. So there is an equality between you and a Buddha in terms of the stainlessness of your true nature. You could also say your suchness or your emptiness is not different from the emptiness or the suchness of a Buddha. Stainlessness often refers in these texts to emptiness or the absence of an inherent existence. And that also is not very amazing. I mean, you could say the emptiness of this table from an inherent nature and the emptiness of this chair of an inherent nature are the same. So my emptiness and the emptiness of a Buddha is not different. So it simply means, what I have in common with a Buddha is the emptiness of my mind, which is not very much. Yeah, that would be reason number 2. And then we have reason number 3, and the fact that its Buddha nature's fruit has been metaphorically applied to the Buddha potential. And because of these 3 reasons, all sentient beings are said to possess the essence of a Buddha. Now, this word metaphorically applied, Sanskrit upachara, needs to be interpreted with a grain of caution. Well, upachara, it can mean metaphorically, but it can also mean in a manner of speech. Yeah. So if you go for the strong interpretation, it means the seed is only metaphorically called by its fruit, yeah, then you would have a real difference between the Buddha nature as a cause and the fully grown Buddha. Yeah. But, if you go for the weak meaning of the word upachara, you could say the fully grown Buddha within, which is still covered by adventitious stain, is called Buddha nature in a manner of speech. Yeah, so you would say, well, when the fully grown Buddha is still covered up with adventitious stains, then, I call it in a manner of speech Buddha nature. Yeah, so upachara would be then just a manner of speech. But, it is not clear how the author of this text was using the word upachara. So it gives, it opens up the possibility of reading a difference, a substantial difference between the cause of Buddhahood and Buddhahood. Yeah. And this is basically what the Ratnagotravibhāga, the analysis of the Jewel family, basically does. Yeah. So it is now further explaining that the 9 examples, like summarized by the 3 reasons, can be grouped together in the first 3 examples. And the first 3 examples, they illustrate the Buddha wisdom, the omniscience, which pervades everything. Which means, it's not your own wisdom, it's just a Buddha's wisdom which is pervading you. Yeah? And that would be the first 3 examples. The pure sphere of the Buddha qualities, the Dhamma dhātu, its teachings, the natural outflow of the Dhamma dhātu, which is the Buddha's teaching, and that would be illustrated by the honey surrounded by bees. And there are 2 types of teachings. There is the profound and the variegated teaching, and they are illustrated by example number 2 and number 3. Yeah? So in other words, the first 3 examples are reinterpreted in the sense that we do not possess a Buddha, but are only pervaded by the embodiment of Buddha qualities. Yeah? And the example of gold, well, with this example, you cannot really help but admit, that you have a full identity of Buddha nature and Buddhahood, because the gold coin, which has fallen into mud, it has all the qualities. It's having the same weight as the cleaned up gold coin. So it has all the value already when it is in the mud. So there is no room for interpreting or reading a difference into the cause and the effect. And but the example number 4, then illustrates, according to the Ratnagotravibhāga, the indivisible stainlessness or suchness, or also the emptiness of our minds through nature. And the emptiness of our mind does not differ from the emptiness of the Buddha's mind. And now, in the remaining 5 examples now, the Ratnagotravibhāga reads a Yogācāra interpretation of the natural present potential and the acquired potential. According to Yogācāra philosophy, we have a naturally present potential. It's the natural luminosity of our mind. But this natural luminosity of the mind is not identical with the fully grown Buddha qualities. So that would be simply a kind of possibility to blossom into Buddha wisdom. It's a true seed or potential. And then you have the acquired potential, which means by studying, by reflecting, and by meditating, you acquire certain qualities. You acquire the potential to become a Buddha with all qualities. So that's a typical Yogācāra philosophy, which does not accept the idea that we are already Buddhas or fully grown Buddhas. Vasubandhu, in his commentary on one of the important Maitreya works, the ornament of Mahayana Sutras, he says, if we were already fully grown Buddhas, it would not make sense that we have to acquire merit and wisdom. Yeah. So if we are already Buddhas, why should we engage in meditation? Why should we study? Why we should be diligent, in practicing the 6 perfections? If we are already Buddhas, we don't need to do all that. So Yogācāra doesn't like the idea of a Buddha nature. Yeah? And now, what the Yogācāras are doing, they have this concept of the 2 potentials, the naturally present potential and the acquired potential. And they are reading these 2 potentials into the 2 examples which support the idea that something has to grow. Namely, the seed which has to grow into a tree, and the future monarch, the embryo of the future monarch, which still has to grow up and become a future king. So the Ratnagotravibhāga is reading this, the 2 Yogācāra concepts of naturally present potential and acquired potential into these examples, and then it's explaining the 3 remaining examples as the fruit of these 2 potentials. Yeah. So the remaining 3 examples then stand for the three embodiments of the Buddha, the Dhammakaya, the Sambhogā, and the Nirmanakaya, which grow from the natural potential and the acquired potential. So the Ratnagotravibhāga really succeeds in turning around the whole intent of the Tathāgatagarbha Sutra and read a Yogācāra philosophy into the Buddha nature doctrine. And the only thing which we really have in common with the Buddha is our emptiness. So that's the only thing which we have one-to-one with the Buddha. And the rest is simply, the Buddha wisdom which pervades us, but we don't partake of that, or it grows from our natural potential and our acquired potential. So it's a full reinterpretation, what we have here. Yeah. And there is one example which is quite telling and which supports my analysis. You remember the example number 5. It's a treasure of gold coins buried under the ground. Now, the Ratnagotravibhāga, it quotes faithfully the Tathagatagarbha Sutra, word by word, every sentence. But when the Tathagatagarbha Sutra explains the example number 5, the sutra says that the treasure buried underground stands for the qualities of the Dhammakaya. Yeah? Which means, the Buddha nature is identical with the Dhammakaya. Because the treasure underground has all the qualities of the Dhammakaya, means full identity of the cause and the effect. And this particular sentence, this identification of the treasure buried underground with the qualities of the Dhammakaya, is left out by the Ratnagotravibhāga. So they did not copy this sentence. But all other words, word by word, they took over everything from the sutra, but this one sentence they did not copy. And why? Because it would go against their strategy of reading a difference between the Buddha nature as a cause and the Buddhahood as a fruit. Yeah. Now, it's easy to understand why Buddhist scholars, wanted to do that. Yeah? Because if the Buddha nature was completely identical with Buddhahood, and then on top of that, if it has an Atman, a personal self, and if it was permanent, then it would come too close to non-Buddhist systems. But if you read a dynamic principle into your mind stream, something which needs to grow, then you're more in line with the mainstream of Buddhist philosophy. Yeah? And this basically was the problem, of the whole Buddha nature system. The perfection of permanence, bliss, self, and purity. Now, there is a very interesting observation. There is one verse in the Ratnagotravibhāga. It goes as follows. Just as all pervading space is not defiled in virtue of its subtle nature, so is this Buddha nature not defiled. I forgot the not, I'm sorry, I just realized now, which is found everywhere in sentient beings. Yeah? And then, the Sanskrit has here a demonstrative pronoun, I am, yeah? And it refers back to the last verse and takes up Buddha element or Buddha nature. Now, the thing is, you find a verse in the Bhagavad Gita, yeah, in the praise of the Lord, yeah, which is not a Buddhist text, yeah, but I'm sure you know that, yeah. And you have exactly the same words. Just as all-pervading space is not defiled in virtue of its subtle nature, so is this self not defiled, which is found everywhere in sentient beings. So like if you just replace this ayam by atma, then you have a verse from the Bhagavad Gita. And that nicely shows how dangerously close the concept of Buddha nature is to non-Buddhist ideas. Yeah. Yeah. So, then you can either try to explain away the full identity between Buddha nature or Buddha and Buddhahood, or what else can you do? You can say the whole system, the whole teaching has only provisional meaning. Yeah. So that means when the Buddha taught that everybody is a Buddha within, he didn't really mean that, but he wanted to encourage his students who would otherwise run away and not follow his teaching. And he would just tell them, look, don't worry, don't be discouraged. You're already a Buddha inside. But this is not a teaching of definitive meaning. Yeah? So if the Buddha had taught, the true nature of your mind is emptiness, well, they would have been scared and maybe turned to another teacher. Yeah? So he gave to a certain group of sentient beings teachings to the effect that they are already fully grown Buddhas inside. Yeah? But at the cost of being very close or getting very close to non-Buddhist religions. Yeah. Now, that leads us to Buddhist hermeneutics, and I show you that the Ratnagotravibhāga, which has a text which has already interpreted the 9 similes from the Tathāgatagarbha Sutra in a Yogācāra fashion, trying to establish a difference between the cause, which is Buddha nature, and the effect, which is fully grown Buddha. It has a very nice final statement in the first chapter, which is the chapter on Buddha nature in the Ratnagotravibhāga. And it goes as follows. Somebody says, some opponent says, if the Buddha element or the Buddha nature, which is a synonym of the word Buddha nature, is thus so difficult to see, given that it is not a fully experiential object for even the highest saints who abide on the final level of non-attachment, what is gained then by teaching it even to foolish ordinary people? Thus, the following 2 verses are dedicated to a summary of the aim and motive of a teaching. Yeah, you have here this technical term prayojana, yeah, and whenever you read this word aim or motive, it indicates that a teaching has been given with a provisional meaning, yeah, with a motive, yeah, and then this is the introduction now to 2 verses which go as follows. Question: why did the Buddhas teach here that a Buddha nature exists in all sentient beings, after they taught everywhere that everything should be known to be empty in every respect, like clouds, visions in a dream, and illusions? So these examples are typical of the discourses of the perfection of wisdom, the Prajnaparamita sutras, which teach that everything is empty. Everything is only like an illusion. It's empty of an inherent existence, yeah? Everything is like in a dream, and so that's a famous group of Buddhist teaching, of Mahayana Buddhist teachings, which spread all over India and the Himalayas, and later on also in Asia and East Asia. And somebody comes up with this idea. So the Buddha taught so often in so many different places the emptiness of everything, yeah, without any exceptions. And now all of a sudden, we have this teaching now of a Buddha nature, of a Buddha element in us, which has all these inseparable qualities. How come? Yeah, how does this work together? And now, the answer is very telling. It says, one may have the following 5 faults: being discouraged, having contempt for inferior persons, clinging to the unreal adventitious stains, denying real Buddha qualities, and excessive self-love. A Buddha nature has been taught in order that those who have these faults abandon them. Yeah? So it is clear that we have certain situations where it is necessary to tell students that they have a Buddha nature. Yeah? And this is exactly what the great Sakya Lama, Sakya Pandita, did. Yeah? Sakya Pandita belongs to one of the 4 major schools of Tibetan Buddhism, the Sakya school. Yeah? And he basically follows in his commentaries the original intent of the Tathāgatagarbha sutras. Yeah? So he doesn't try to explain away, or he doesn't try to establish a difference between the cause and the effect. He simply accepts, the original intent of all the Buddha nature teachings, yeah, without engaging in any hermeneutical gymnastics. But then he simply says, well, but these teachings have provisional meaning. Yeah, they are only niyata. And as a Madhyamaka, normally when you claim that something has a provisional meaning, you have to name the intentional ground, you have to give a motive, and you have to give a contradiction if taken at face value. So to say is that something has only provisional meaning is something really severe. You cannot simply do that. Yeah, on the one hand, it was really necessary to accept that some teachings had only provisional meaning. Yeah, there is one verse in the Udana Varga where it is said, after the Brahmin had killed father and mother and all the other ministers, yeah, he is going away without any sin. And the Buddha had said that in the Udana Varga. So a prince who wanted to become king, he killed his parents, something which used to be quite common in India, obviously. You had no democratic elections where you could get rid of a king. So that's what you need. So you had a prince, who killed his father, his mother, the ministers, and the whole clan probably, And then, he was approaching the ashram of the Buddha, and the Buddha had seen what's going on. Huh? He had seen, okay, if I tell this prince that it's okay what he had done, he will support the ashram, he will turn to Buddhism, he will convert to Buddhism, and eventually, purify his sins. So that's why he told him, after you have killed your father and your mother, you're going without sin. And then, the monks, came to the Buddha, oh, how could you say something like that? You cannot kill your father and your mother and then you are without sin. And the Buddha said, well, this teaching has only provisional meaning. It's not the definitive meaning. And the definitive meaning is, after having killed ignorance and karmic forces, you go without sin. And to kill and to destroy is expressed by the same Sanskrit word han. So it works very well in the Indian text. Yeah, you're using the same verb. And so he told the monks, well, this was a teaching of provisional meaning. So you had that, and this distinction between teachings of provisional and definitive meaning was used later also to introduce new philosophical concepts, yeah, and to show why they don't contradict the earlier Buddhist teachings. And now, if you say now as a scholar that a certain statement of the Buddha only has provisional meaning, you have to prove that by showing an intentional ground, a motive, and a contradiction. So intentional ground would be the Buddha was thinking of what is definitive when he said something which is only provisional. So the Buddha was thinking of killing ignorance and karmic forces when he said killing father and mother. And the intentional ground in this case would be Madhyamaka emptiness. Yeah? So it means, according to Sakya Pandita, the Buddha was thinking of the emptiness of your mind when he told you you have a Buddha inside. So the intentional ground would be emptiness. Yeah? But he didn't tell, he didn't tell you that your mind is empty. Just in the same way as he didn't tell the prince that after killing ignorance and karmic forces, he's without sin. He said father and mother. In the same way, he told you you have a Buddha inside. Yeah? And the motive is clearly stated also. Well, it means the motive is to help discourage disciples. And the contradiction, if taken at face value, the teaching of a Buddha nature contradicts the Prajnaparamita sutras. And you don't want to do that, right? I mean, because the Prajnaparamita, the discourses on the perfection of wisdom, they were really, the quintessence of Mahayana teaching. You don't really want to contradict them, right? So, but this is what happens here, if you teach that everybody has a fully grown Buddha inside, well, there is something which is not empty, right? So that would contradict the Prajnaparamita. Yeah. Now, let's see. I'm just looking whether there is some more water somewhere. Yeah, it's a little bit dry. There was a famous Tibetan scholar who was basically preparing the ground for Sakyapantita, and he was translating the basic Indian treatise on Buddha nature and wrote his own analysis of Buddha nature theory, and he interprets Buddha nature also in terms of emptiness. And as you remember, the main treatise says, well, from Buddha nature, nothing needs to be removed and nothing needs to be added. So the original text says, well, there is adventitious stains, and they are not really going into the nature of Buddha, of the Buddha nature. It's like the mud does not really enter the gold coin. When a gold coin is falling into the mud, the gold remains pure. The excrements and the mud does not enter the gold. Yeah? So they are not really harming the gold. Nothing really needs to be removed. In a modern way, you would say nothing needs to be chemically removed from the gold. The gold has remained always pure. And Nolodin Sherab says, well, the objective support of the defilements, a falsely projected own nature, has never existed in the first place. So nothing needs to be really removed. So he says basically the mind overpowered by ignorance, hatred, and so forth is empty of an own nature. Yeah? And these defilements don't really exist. There is nothing that needs to be removed. They have never existed in the first place. That's a typical Madhyamaka stance. Yeah? And nothing needs to be added to Buddha nature. Well, that's a little bit more difficult. Now, Nolodin Sherab says, well, nothing needs to be added to the cause of Buddha nature. And the cause of Buddha nature, according to Nolodin Sherab, is the emptiness of your mind. So because your mind is empty of an inherent nature, it can transform. Yeah? So it can change. You can give up defilements, and you can generate properties or Buddha qualities. Because of the empty nature of your mind, it can be worked on. It can be transformed. And how do you do that? Well, you meditate on the emptiness of your mind. And by meditating on the emptiness of your mind, all the defilements, they just dissolve in the morning sun, when the fog is dissolving. In a similar way, the fog and the clouds of your defilements dissolve by meditating on the sun of emptiness. Yeah? So all the defilements, they dissolve, yeah? And the Buddha qualities are generated by this kind of meditation. So he says, well, what has always existed is not the Buddha qualities or the Buddha nature, but the cause of Buddha nature. And the cause of Buddha nature would be the emptiness. So emptiness has always existed. Yeah? So that's what Nolodin Sherab does. And he, like by his interpretation, he prepared the ground for Sakyapantita's interpretation. Yeah. And then, like there are like some others, like who simply say that Buddha nature is a synonym of emptiness, and the difference is subtle here. Yeah. So, like a synonym means you have two different words, technical terms, which refer to the same thing, and that means, like a Buddha nature would be then simply a synonym of emptiness. And the Gelug scholars who follow that, they follow Aryadeva, who was a disciple of the famous philosopher Nagarjuna. And Aryadeva said, emptiness has many synonyms. Yeah? So that means, that Buddha nature simply is the emptiness of an own nature. And the two words mean the same thing. They refer to the same thing. Yeah? So that's one thing. Now, like we also have other schools. Well, it's a little bit, I mean, I had to tell you that about the emptiness, right? I mean, it was, it's what most, Tibetan scholars do. But it's a little bit boring in a way, isn't it? Because, it takes away all this nice Buddha nature teaching, all this idea, that you are a Buddha inside. And there was a school which was also not so happy about this Madhyamaka or interpretation of Buddha nature as being emptiness. And that was the school of the Chonangpas. And Chomonang was a monastery in central Tibet. And one of the most famous early masters of this school was Dolpopa Sherab Gyaltsen, who lived from 1292 to 1361. Yeah? And he was like a very influential Lama. They like gathered many disciples, and their monasteries became very influential, like in central Tibet and all over like Tibet. And here you see Tsangwa Gön, a very famous monastery of the Chonangpas. The Chonangpas, they had to relocate in the 17th century, when the fifth Dalai Lama was consolidating his power in central Tibet, and a lot of Chonangpas had to go to the east, to Amdo, and that's now the present seat of the Chonangpas. And when you go there, you still find, like a lot of scholars and monks practicing the Chonang doctrine, and you can study with them. And we had research projects with the Chonangpas. And they have a very positive approach to the Buddha nature teachings. So they say, like, well, for us, Buddha nature is Buddhahood. So they just follow the original sutras and take them literally. And they say, well, it's an absolute reality beyond space and time. Yeah. I mean, you may be like wondering, what does it mean to be beyond space and time? But well, I mean, I was, 2 years ago, I was attending a physics conference in Greece, and one of the leading physicists, Carlo Rovelli, he told me, space and time is only imagined by us. So, we just, arrange, all what we experience, in life, in a space-time in order not to go crazy. But in reality, there is no space and time. So I don't know, I'm not a physicist. I don't know whether this is right or not. But, all I want to say, maybe it's not so crazy after all to say that the ultimate reality is beyond space and time. But anyway, this is what Dolpopa Sherab does. And he also says, this equation of Buddha nature with Buddhahood and absolute truth has definitive meaning. So he would basically go the same way as Sakyapantita, but in the end, he deviates from Sakyapantita, while Sakyapantita is saying all this full equation of Buddha nature with Buddhahood is only of provisional meaning. Chonangpas and Dolpo Sherab Gyaltsen says it has definitive meaning. Yeah? And he also continues and says the ultimate like which is the Buddha nature and Buddhahood, is other than the relative truth. And the absolute is empty of the relative. Yeah? So he makes a very strict distinction between the ultimate Buddha nature, which is identical with Buddhahood and all the Buddha qualities, which is really separate from the adventitious stains, like from our ordinary mind, overpowered by ignorance and so forth. So you have something which is empty of something else. You have the ultimate Buddha nature, which is empty of the relative truth, and that was later called Shentong. Yeah? So this is like a very interesting interpretation of emptiness, which leaves some ultimate qualities in the ultimate, yeah, where emptiness is not negating everything, but only like ordinary states of mind and duality and so forth, but it does not negate the Buddha qualities. Yeah? So that's something you find in many different passages in the Buddha nature literature. Yeah. Now this Shentong basically means Buddha nature is the ultimate truth. It is beyond space and time and not empty of an independent own nature. It does not belong to the process of dependent arising like everything else of relative truth. In other words, the process of dependent arising is restricted to the relative truth, and it is empty of everything else, the relative truth dependent arising. Yeah? And the absolute entirely differs from the relative. Yeah? So now, like I see, like we have a little bit, we don't have so much time. I wanted to say something about the Laṅkāvatārasūtra, but that maybe like we don't have enough time to do that. But I wanted to like say something also about Buddha nature and the great seal, like Mahāmudrā. And well, why great seal? Well, I mean, Buddha nature and Mahāmudrā are both terms which describe the true nature of our mind. But we have different Buddhist systems which have used their own terminology, and so that we get different technical terms for one and the same thing. And like Mahāmudrā is a great seal because it refers to the true nature of our mind streams, and this true nature pervades everything and is valid for each of us. For each mind stream, this is true, yeah, that we have a luminous Buddha nature. Yeah? And seal, the word seal is used in order to convey the idea that this law like applies to everybody. For example, let's say you live in a kingdom and a king gives an order. He says everybody has to pay 10% tax, and then he puts a seal under this law. That means, like everybody in the kingdom really has to pay 10%. There's not a single citizen in the kingdom who is exempted from this rule. So in a similar way, like the Great Seal, means that the fact that we have this luminous Buddha nature in us applies to everybody. There is not a single a sentient being in the universe which does not have this luminous Buddha nature. So that's why it is called Mahāmudrā, the Great Seal, the great law, so to say, the great order which pervades everything. Yeah? And it was a term, Mahāmudrā was a term used by tantric masters, and so they started to blend, the Mahāmudrā teachings of luminous true nature of mind with Madhyamaka emptiness, and they basically taught some very special yoga techniques. They gave tantric empowerments. They gave mind-to-mind transmissions. So when you became a disciple of these Mahāmudrā masters, you had a privileged access to emptiness. Whereas, in early Buddhism, you didn't have immediate direct access to emptiness. You could only use inferences to like somehow intellectually understand the emptiness of everything, but you would not be able to directly realize it. Yeah, it's like you cannot climb a mountain, but you see that smoke is coming up, from behind the mountain. It looks like smoke, it smells like smoke, so there must be a fire behind the mountain. You cannot see the fire directly, yeah, but by inferences you can establish the fact that there must be a fire. So in a similar way, in early Buddhism, you cannot see emptiness directly, yeah, but you could infer it by logical reasonings. Yeah, so you could do philosophical arguments and establish the emptiness of an own nature. But like when you have special yoga techniques and mind-to-mind transmissions, you could, as a beginner, after some time, have a direct vision or encounter with emptiness. And this direct experience was then explained by positive terms like natural luminosity, Buddha nature, or self-awareness. Yeah? So like the Siddhas in the Mahāmudrā tradition, they worked with the concept of Buddha nature, and they said, well, when you realize emptiness directly, you have this luminous mind experience. It's a positive experience. Yeah? And the thing is, like Asanga, as we have seen just 10 minutes ago, he said, like even very advanced bodhisattvas cannot directly access Buddha nature. Yeah? So why did you teach it? What is the point of teaching it, even if a 10th level bodhisattva can only have a glimpse of it? He said, well, we had to teach it because people were discouraged and so on and so on. Now, like here, like in this 11th century Mahāmudrā milieu of the Siddhas, you could now, as a beginner, like have a direct access to Buddha nature, yes, through special yoga techniques. Yeah. And Maitripa was one of these Mahāmudrā masters who combined the yoga techniques of the Siddhas, who lived in a sub-culture in the jungle or in the forests, in the mountains in India. And he, like as a great scholar, went for some time into the milieu of these Siddhas and got these special yoga techniques and meditation instructions. And he was like sent back by his guru Shavaripa to the monasteries, to the university monasteries, and teach Mahāmudrā in a university context. And then he started to combine the traditional Mahayana philosophy of Madhyamaka and emptiness with the special teachings of the Siddhas. Yeah? And so like he relates Mahāmudrā to the Madhyamaka view of non-abiding. Yeah? And non-abiding basically means that you refrain from like abiding in extremes like existence, non-existence, or you somehow as a Madhyamaka understand that every theory, every model of reality has a flaw. Like I feel very much reminded to these like statements of the early Buddhist masters when I read present articles on astronomy, and like always they find a mistake or some problem which needs to be solved. So you may come up with a very interesting model of reality, but again you find a little bit of mistake here and there. And the Madhyamakas basically point out there is no model of reality which is free from mistake. So the only thing that you can do is you can refute wrong models of reality, or you can show like the flaws of models of reality, and you end up in a state which is free from conceptual analysis. Or rather, you give up like making or adhering to wrong models of reality. But when you do that, yeah, when you refrain like from conceptual analysis, then you have a direct experience of your luminous mind, and that is then like called Buddha nature, yeah, or also Mahāmudrā. Yeah. And like the practice, which is prescribed is the the practice is amanasikara. And maybe you heard this term amanasikara already. It means not to become mentally engaged. And that means you refrain from directing your attention to wrong concepts of reality. And there was a big debate in Tibet, the Samya debate, between the gradual Indian path and the path of sudden enlightenment, represented by a Chinese monk Mohayan. And the Chinese side was described as pertaining to the system of amanasikara, of simply withdrawing your attention from concepts. Yeah? So you just, do not get mentally engaged in wrong ideas. And so that would be now taken up. This term amanasikara is now taken up by Maitripa and by his colleagues. And they accept this meaning which I just explained, that you withdraw your attention from conceptually constructed duality. Yeah? But at the same time, they do a further analysis of the term amanasikara, and they say, well, amanasikara, is a a. It consists of a and manasikara. So a is a privative a. It's a particle which negates. Yeah? And manasikara means engagement, mental engagement. So a manasikara means non-engagement. So you negate mental engagement. But now, Maitripa says, well, we are philosophers. We are not simply negating in a simple way. So when we negate, we negate as Madhyamikas. We negate in a way that we establish the emptiness of something. And so then he argues that it stays for anutpada, which means non-arising. Yeah? And then, he says, well, and this non-arising is emptiness. You have so many different Madhyamaka works which say that non-arising is emptiness. Emptiness is described as non-arising. And this emptiness, then he is taken as luminous emptiness. So the becomes now for Maitripa luminous emptiness. So then, the manasikara would be then engagement, yeah, with luminous emptiness. And then he argues, well, but when you engage with luminous emptiness, you are not doing it in a conceptual way, but you are doing it in a direct way, and that would be self-empowerment. So he ends up also reading the idea that you empower yourself within the luminous nature of your mind. Yeah? And that then is related to the concept of Buddha nature. So amanasikara then has two different meanings, yeah, for him. One is the ordinary meaning of not becoming mentally engaged with the conceptually constructed duality. So you withdraw your attention from duality and from concepts and wrong ideas about what reality is. But at the same time, you create the space for directly realizing the luminous nature of your mind, which is luminous emptiness. So you empower yourself in the luminous nature of your mind, which is your Buddha nature. And Maitripa then links up this doctrine, this Mahāmudrā doctrine, with the teaching of Buddha nature. And that would be then a tantric interpretation of Buddha nature. Basically, it's the same like the old Buddha nature. The only difference is that you have a privileged direct access already as a beginner. Yeah? And there were also other interpretations of Buddha nature. Maybe I give you that, and I'll come to the end, for question and answer. And according to tradition, Maitripa, and well, that's like the Indian tantric yogi and siddha of the 11th century. He had a direct encounter with the future Buddha Maitreya. Yeah, and like according to Tibetan tradition, Maitripa is said to have received from Maitreya pointing out instructions on the Gyūlama, which is the standard Indian treatise on Buddha nature. Yeah, and like Maitreya was like in a dream giving some special instructions to Maitripa, and on the 4 inconceivable points of Buddha nature, coexisting with one's impure states of mind. So like the 4 inconceivable points is basically why do we have ignorance when we have an omniscient Buddha in us? Or why do we have to purify our ignorance when we are already pure as a Buddha? So there are 4 like inconceivable points related to these questions. Basically, you know, like the problem that follow by teaching 2 layers of mind. Yeah? One layer of a Buddha nature with all Buddha qualities, and like which is covered up by the ordinary mind of ignorance and so forth. So like Maitreya was giving very special instructions to point out like the inconceivable points. And he says, like the text, you know, I translate now from this text, the Gyūlama Dampa. Maitreya said, "This being only a dream, jump into an abyss of water. You must recognize that all phenomena are like a dream." Having jumped into water, he recognized, Maitripa recognized phenomena as being like a dream. Having invoked the recognition that this is but a dream, Maitreya directly introduced Maitripa to this entire instruction here, and the realization that the psychophysical aggregates, the skandhas, are like an illusion dawned in Maitripa. Then Maitreya asked, when you are not dreaming anymore, do you know what this object which appears in such a way is? And Maitripa replied, I do not know. Maitreya then directly pointed out the inconceivable nature that even though the mind is naturally pure, the samsara of thoughts occurs, and said, cut fear and attachment and jump into the fire. Moreover, he heard Maitreya say, the body of you who has jumped melts into the sky, and you experience the mere awareness of the great bliss of not focusing on anything. In the sky a sound occurred. Consider now what man and which fear went where. Since this was only his dream, Maitripa became aware that appearances had no basis and did not go or did not come. At this time Maitreya said, you are naturally pure, and Maitripa emerged in the sky as the man he was formerly. Then his body emerged again, and so did all appearances there. Maitreya asked, what has this probably been? Maitripa replied, all this happened in a dream. Maitreya asked, from what did it arise? Maitripa replied, a dream arises from thoughts and nothing else. It has occurred from the sky. Maitreya said, you must understand that in a like matter, all phenomena have occurred from the naturally pure mind. At this time, Maitreya said, I directly pointed out the inconceivable nature that although the mind is naturally pure, adventitious stains and defilements arise. Now, this nicely shows like what a direct mind-to-mind transmission could be. Yeah. So you would ask, of course, you know, like if, like in the Mahāmudrā tradition, I get a privileged access to this Buddha nature. Well, the question is, how would I get this privileged access, right? So, like, because normally, you know, like you would have to be reborn and reborn many lifetimes and accumulate merit and wisdom. Only then you become a 10th level bodhisattva. You get only a glimpse of Buddha nature, and here, all of a sudden, as a beginner, you have a direct access. So how come? And this gives you an idea, like what such direct pointing out instructions could be. It's like you jump into a fire, jump into an abyss, and then you jump, even though you only dream, you know, like you have this shock. Okay, you are jumping into an abyss, and then all of a sudden, you know, like your mind is in a state where you have a short moment which is free from duality. Because you jump into an abyss, you know, like you overcome your ego. You're not clinging anymore to your life or to your body or anything. And in this very short moment, you know, like a Maitreya could point out the true nature. There was a very short gap, you know, in the clouds of your defilements. And by this very special instruction and like order, and having followed this order, like there was a small gap opening, and the teacher could just, like point out, like the true nature through this small gap. So this is a little bit, it gives you an idea, because I cannot talk from my own experience, so I can only tell you what I found in the texts. So like I found this very interesting text to show what this pointing out instruction, mind-to-mind transmission could be. There was, of course, also like the formal tantric empowerment, where like in a ritual, like you enter a mandala, and at some point, after having completed a very complex, like a sequence of rituals, you get a direct realization of your true nature of mind, and then you can work with that. But on top of that, there were also this kind of direct pointing out instructions and mind-to-mind transmissions. And now, like a Buddha nature became a completely different set of teaching. It became something which was available to everybody who was ready to take up the teachings of the Siddhas. So I think I conclude with this, and then I thank you for your attention. And
thank you very much, Professor Matthijs, for your inspiring lecture. Now the section is open to the floor. Please raise your hands if you have any questions. Yeah, Jenny in the middle.
Thank you, Professor, for a wonderful lecture. I learned so much about it. Just on that last point that you mentioned, this mind-to-mind transmission, is it similar to the Manasikara technique that the Chinese monk described in the Samye debate? If so, does that mean this sudden realization is actually, something that can be practiced and realized?
Yeah, thank you. That's a very good point. And indeed, like there is a connection between the Amanasikara teaching and what has been given as a mind-to-mind transmission to Maitripa. So it's directly connected to that. Yeah, because according to this understanding, you withdraw your attention from dualistic clinging. So that's when you jump into the abyss, right? But then, you're not only withdrawing, but you're also engaged, you're also realizing the luminous nature. And that's what's happening, in this short gap. So, it is very much the teaching of Amanasikara. Now, I don't know, whether Amanasikara was always understood in this way, yeah? But, when you look, you have the word Amanasikara already in early Pali literature. In the Majjhima Nikaya, in the Anguttara Nikaya, and in the Sunyata Chula Sutta, it says, the monk withdraws his attention from the village, and he directs his attention to the ground in the forest. And then it goes on, he withdraws his attention from the ground in the forest, he directs his attention to the breathing. So and you have in the Yogācāra Bhumi and many other literatures, whenever Manasikara is explained, it's always withdrawing from something, but always also combined with directing your attention to something else. So I think, it must be also in Chan Buddhism in this way. Yeah, I'm not a specialist in Chan Buddhism or in Zen Buddhism, but my guess is, you also have this, engagement with true nature or luminous nature, but they don't talk about it. Yeah, but there are others who are more qualified to speak on Chan Buddhism. Yeah.
Chan Buddhism definitely talks about withdrawing from.
It doesn't. Yeah.
It does. Yeah. Withdrawing from the object.
Not becoming mentally engaged. Yeah. According to Kamala Shila, this is what Chan Buddhism did. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So, the gentleman.
You have to pass on the mic, otherwise.
Thank you, Professor Matthijs. It was a presentation of the concept of Tathāgatagarbha with great clarity, so I thank you. I have two questions. The first one is, how do you position the concept of Tathāgatagarbha in Buddhist thought, the evolution itself? Do you see it as an intrinsic development within the history of Buddhism, or is it a reaction to a broader trend in Indian philosophy? That's my first question. And the second one, I was fascinated by this parallel passage you pointed out between the Ratnagotravibhāga and the Bhagavad Gita. I understand it was first pointed by Johnston. I can't remember who first raised the parallelism.
Yeah, Takasaki also was writing a paper on it. And, yeah.
There seems to be still some controversy how to interpret it. So because they were saying the Bhagavad Gita passage was a later development in the Vedanta sort of tradition. So has that riddle been solved, and how do you see the relationship between the two?
Well, thank you for these very scholarly questions, which are very much to the point. And of course, the question arises, where did this whole idea of Tathagatagarbha come from? I mean, all we can say is that we have this group of Tathāgatagarbha sutras, which explain the different aspects, and I think you had this, the initial idea was that the Buddha relics were replacing the Guru. The Buddha has gone into nirvana and there was a gap. And then, instead of having the living Guru, you have still his dhātus, his relics, and then you were worshipping the relics. And these relics were then considered to be permanent and so on, because relics don't die anymore. So maybe this original 4 perfections were not so philosophical. They were simply, now they are put in the stūpa and they are kind of, and then, of course, you can have then a metaphorical meaning, then you can keep the relics of the Buddha inside you, and then, I think that was one strand of development, yeah. And then, another would be maybe you cannot at some point you run into a problem if you define the ultimate only negatively all the time. So you need, at some point, you need to counterbalance that. Especially, among lay Buddhists, and the Queen Srimala, she lived in southern India, and in the end of 2nd and 3rd century, and so and the kings in southern India, they were already looking towards non-Buddhist systems, but the queens were still very much supporting Buddhist ideas, and well, I mean, they somehow liked this idea, so it was something. The lay community somehow liked teachings which also present the ultimate in positive terms. And so that's one idea I have to that, yeah. And well, the other thing is, it's true the Bhagavad Gita is of course much later, but the verse, which I quoted, it could have been around already earlier. And it shows, that it comes from a common group of ideas, which are very similar. Yeah. So, and so the Buddhist Buddha nature ideas and pre-Bhagavad Gita ideas, they could have been very close to each other, and they may have mutually influenced each other. Yeah. So, I mean, and the 4 perfections also. I mean, the Lambert Schmidhausen once thought that it might be a Sankhya influence also, and I think there was a lot of mutual influence, between different Hindu philosophical systems, and I mean, when you talk to a Theravada monk in Southeast Asia, and you talk about later Mahayana and Buddha nature developments, he says, well, all the teachings which were refuted by the original Buddha, they came back through the back door again, So you have to also consider, that Buddhism was in India not something isolated, right? So it was surrounded by many other philosophical systems, and so there might have been an influence also. But these are the kind of questions we have to we have to find answers to these kind of questions in the future, in future research. Thank you. There were some
Any more
over there.
questions? Oh, the Venerable at the back.
Thank you. We all know that historical Buddha suffered a lot in terms of he wanted to become a Buddha. Perhaps he was not aware that he had a Buddha nature. However, you also briefly mentioned about Nepal, Brahmins from there. I'm also from Nepal, so I have a bunch of friends who are Brahmins. And Brahmins or Brahmins, which also means the wise ones. And those who are Brahmins, the Hindu Brahmins, they believe that they are Brahmins by birth. That means they are wise by birth. And also I do have friends, those Brahmins who are not wise, dummies. And they also believe that they are Brahmins by birth anyway. So likewise, when we come back to Buddha nature, we're also Buddha by nature somehow. Mm-hmm. And are we promoting belief system like any other religion? It is a problematic.
Yeah, well, I mean, we are something by birth, right? You get this idea, of course, like when you talk about like an ever-present potential with all the qualities. So something which you are like having from birth. So sure, that's very similar in a way. I agree. But then, like in Brahmin systems, they explain, like Atman and Brahman in different ways Buddhists would not accept. So the permanence, the permanent Atman of a Buddha nature would be like interpreted by mainstream Buddhists in such a way that, well, I found a very nice explanation by Gyalo Tsawashanupel. He says, like, when you do Mahāmudrā meditation and you have very strong attachment, and then you can overcome very strong attachment by just relaxing into this attachment and discover the open space-like nature of this attachment, and by looking into this space-like quality of your attachment, attachment gets pacified, and this way, you gain independence. Yeah, because you can always, whatever happens in life, you can always, relax into the space-like nature of mind, and this is not dependent on external conditions because the space-like nature is always there, and it also has not been created by anything. So Gyalo Tsawa says, Nagarjuna, he said that something has a svabhava, or you could say also Atman in a similar way, if it is not caused by conditions, and if it does not depend on external conditions. So he says, well, this space-like nature of your mind is not caused and it does not depend on any conditions, just like space has not been caused and is not depending on any conditions. And that's what we call the Atman. That's what we call the perfection of self. Yeah? So it's a different concept of self has been reinterpreted in a way that it becomes acceptable for Buddhists. And why is it permanent? Well, the thing is, even though you become a Buddha, you remain in samsara until all sentient beings are liberated from samsara. So, but this is never happening because samsara has so many suffering beings, limitless suffering beings, and you will never empty samsara from suffering sentient beings. So, as a Bodhisattva and Buddha, you have to remain in samsara forever. And that's why Buddha nature and later the Buddhahood, which comes from the Buddha nature, is permanent. But it's not like a static permanence. It's simply a dynamic permanence which continues because the activity of Buddhakayas is still needed. So, you have these concepts of Atman and permanence and so on, but they are interpreted then in a way that they are acceptable by Buddhists. And so that would be a difference to the Brahmin doctrine. Anyway, this is what Sridharana accepted then. Like he sent back like his disciple to me and told me, you are a true Buddhist, after I had explained this to him. I don't know whether this answers, but yeah. But there were some more questions over there.
So in the interest of time, yeah, let's take the final question. Gentleman in the middle. The one in black. Yeah, the gentleman in the middle, the one in black. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you so much for the presentation. It was a lot of terms that I wasn't very aware of yet, but it was very interesting. And I have some questions about several terms that were discussed. Like right now, you were talking about the Atman and
about what? About
Atman.
Atman. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Sorry. And also for me, it's a bit hard to fully understand Atman, Buddha nature, and purified empty mind. As in, this Atman, is it referred to the ultimate purified mind, self, let's say? And is that the Buddha nature, is it beyond that mind, that it would be like the no self from like non-duality? Or, because I'm very much not being able to properly understand this difference between these two terms.
Well, thank you. You're pointing to the really important aspects of Buddha nature doctrine, and one of them is the idea of Atman and Buddha nature, and as a Dharmakaya, it is equated with Dharmakaya. It has this quality of Atman, and this has been considered as problematic by many. Yeah, so you have to admit that, when you read the original discourses on Buddha nature, you find some elements which are disturbing. I mean, for a Buddhist, they are disturbing because you don't want to accept an Atman. And then there are strategies to explain away the Atman. Yeah, and that's basically not admitting an Atman. So you're just saying, well, it's just the space-like open nature of mind, which does not depend on external causes and conditions, and which has not been caused, and that would be the Atman. So, but a Hindu would not be happy with this definition of Atman. So it's just a way of explaining it away. Yeah, and then whether Buddha nature is really separate from our dualistic mind or not. That's also a very interesting question, and there were different answers to this question. So some say, no, they are not really different. It's like the wave and the ocean. Yeah. So the Buddha nature is like the ocean, but when a lot of strong wind comes up, you have waves on the ocean. So the Buddha nature, it can get steered up by the wind of ignorance and so on, and it can develop the ordinary consciousness of duality. Yeah, but you can simply, through Buddhist practice, you can get rid of this duality through meditation and analysis, and then the ocean calms down and becomes clear, and that's then the undisturbed Buddha nature. So in a sense, ordinary mind and Buddha nature would be just the same thing. But there have been also other interpretations, especially the Chunangpas. They compared Buddha nature and the ordinary mind with the example of gold and the mud or the excrements. So mud, when you analyze the mud, you don't find any gold. Yeah, it's only what covers up the gold. Yeah, but when you analyze the wave, you find ocean water. So that means, when you follow the example of the gold and the mud, then the Buddha nature would be a separate layer. You would have two layers of mind. One would be the Buddha nature with all its quality, and the second layer of the ordinary mind, which is covering up. So you have these two concepts. And there have been a lot of discussions going on, backward and forward. But that would be now too complex, to go into. But it was a good question, it points to an essential point. Thank you for asking.
I know that you may have more questions to ask, and you are very welcome to stay behind for our tea reception and have more academic exchange with Professor. So can I now invite all of you to join me to give a big hand again to thank Professor Mathis for sharing your wisdom with us today. And we are very grateful to your valuable sharing, and we very much hope that we have chance to learn from you again in the near future. So, and we are, of course, once again, very grateful to the Venerable Yuen Memorial Trust for its generous support to make this lecture possible. And thank you to you all for joining, and we hope to see you all again in our future events. Thank you.